Is this thing on?
This thing is on, I think.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Hello. Chris, I wanted to ask you, do you want to share your screen and be the master of your own PowerPoint, or do you want me to do it and you just tell me when to click?
That's probably easiest, just to go ahead and have you do it. It seems to work out fairly well. So,
Okay. All right.
Christy, can we ask Will the same question? So Will Sinamore is doing the presentation on the server.
It would be fine if you'd like to advance the slides. Just if you
Okay.
want to dive off into one of the other documents for more detail, that's where I'll need to take over control.
Okay, I don't have your PowerPoint. I just have it in a PDF form.
Okay, then I can just drive. That's fine.
Okay, all right.
All right, Greg, 6 o'clock, you're on.
I hear you, but we don't have a quorum yet. We have we have 3 board members. Let's call this meeting to order, 6 o'clock. We finished the study session this afternoon at 3:30. I'll call to order by reading the Bear Valley Community the mission statement for our CSD. The Bear Valley Community Services District is committed to providing high-quality municipal services to the residents of Bear Valley Springs in a reliable, professional, safe, cost-effective, and environmentally conscious manner. And then we'll skip to attendance. Christy, will you call the roll?
Director Grace?
Here.
Director Jensen? He is not here yet. Oh, there he is, Director Jensen. We're taking roll. Okay, I believe Director Quinn will be absent for this meeting. Director Roberts?
Here.
Director Hahn?
I am also here. Will we please rise and lead the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. And it brings us to approval of the agenda. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Steve. I think the second was Director Grace.
Yes, sir.
Christy, roll call, please.
Director Grace?
Aye.
Director Jensen?
Aye.
Vice President Roberts?
Aye.
President Hahn?
I also vote aye. Motion carries 4-0. Public comments on non-agenda items. Back to you, Christy.
Members of the public may address the board on matters not listed on this agenda. The board cannot take action on any item that is not on the agenda. The board or staff may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed or ask questions for clarification. These items may also be referred to staff or scheduled on a future agenda. There will be a separate opportunity for public comment for each item on the agenda. Let's see what we've got here. Okay, I do have one email that was sent, and then we can go to hands if we have any. This is an email from Jiva Freevert. Please read these during the open session if I can't be heard. 1, does the biosolid waste summary, pages 234 to 237, testing indicate the affluent water levels would be the same, or does the water get tested separately? 2, also, what are the costs of solid removals? 3, I'm not sure who posts the transfer station stats, but would like to see a table with the monthly comparisons and the cost for the month. It would help us understand if we're doing better with recycling, etc. 4, I haven't seen any comments in the staff report regarding mixed trash, fines, additional labor to remove illegally dumped items, etc. Would you have them add that to their monthly reports? 5, are cameras in full use and providing full coverage? Are they being monitored? Are the transfer station personnel being reduced as promised as cameras came online? 6, would you post the dead tree removal phases, which identify the lots, acres, and locations for each phase? Then we'll all know where we are in the lineup. 7, was it said that the loggers could stage on the Nature Conservancy at the end of Medicine Bow? 8, how much does the CSD receive from leasing CSD land to local ranchers? Is there a map that outlines the leased area? Where is that line item in the budget? Okay. And it looks like I do not have any other hands.
Consent calendar, item number 7. Back to you, Christy.
Okay, let me get my agenda up if you don't mind real quick.
Sure.
Okay. Get here. Consent items are considered routine and are intended to be acted upon in one motion without discussion. During this portion of the meeting, the consent calendar will be read aloud. Prior to approval, the president will give the board, staff, and public the opportunity to pull any item for discussion. The remaining calendar will be acted upon. Any pulled items will then be heard and acted upon individually. A, approve minutes of the January 11th, 2021 regular board meeting. B, accept register of warrants for January 2021.
Thank you. Would any member of the public wish to pull either item for discussion? I don't see any hands. Any member of the staff like to pull either item for discussion? Hearing none, does any member of the board wish to pull an item for discussion?
No.
I heard something?
No.
No. Oh, thank you very much. In that case, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Honorable President, I'll make a motion, move to approve the minutes of the January 11th, 2021 regular board meeting and accept the register of warrants for January 2021.
Thank you.
Second.
I've got a motion by Director Grace and a second by Vice President Roberts. Roll call vote, please.
Director Grace,
Aye.
Director Jensen,
Aye.
Vice President Roberts,
Aye.
President Hahn.
I also vote aye, carries 4-0. Disclosures by Board of Directors, Christy.
Board members are asked to disclose any outside communications with individuals and organizations that have an action item on this agenda that pertains directly to them or their specific personal or private interests, and which communication is not disclosed or included in the agenda package, so that all interested persons have an equal opportunity to express and represent their interests.
Anyone?
Nothing.
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 Thank you, everyone. So nothing to disclose. Item 9, presentation and acceptance. Oh, I have nothing to disclose. Presentation and acceptance of annual financial report. A is presentation of annual financial report prepared by Fedak and Brown, LLP.
And thank you, President Hahn. I'll just start out with a little bit of background on this. We started working with our auditors in June. That was called our interim audit, where they do preliminary field work. They will test, certain cash receipts and accounts payable documents, and we'll give them a list of our disbursements, and they'll send us back, their samples, and we provide all the documentation that they need just to try to get some of the work out of the way. We did do it remote this year. That was a first, but I think the process went very well. We then had the final audit field work done in October. Again, we did this remotely. We provided them any other documentation they needed. And after that field work was done, we continued to work with them and answer any questions and provide any requested documentation. And then they worked to prepare our annual financial report. And so here we have it here to present, and I'll turn it over to Christopher Brown with Fedak and Brown LLP to present.
Mr. Brown, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good evening, board members. We'll go ahead and we have a PowerPoint that will probably be brought up. But in the meantime, once again, my name is Chris Brown. I'm the managing partner of the firm, engagement partner on this audit as well. Go ahead and advance to the next slide, please. Okay. As Hamid said basically, you know, kind of what we went through with regard to the audit. But I'd like you to know that the audit was performed in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted in the United States of America. Those are the guidelines that auditors must follow when performing an audit. Adding a little bit to what was just previously gone over, our procedures, assessing the district's internal controls. Mohammed was talking about, you know, coming out earlier in the year. We're basically looking at various transaction testing and best practices, internal controls and such. We're assessing those internal controls and designing our audit at year end based on those results. After the year end numbers are all closed down after June 30th, we're agreeing the balances to supporting documentation and performing analysis of the key relationships within the financial statements themselves. Okay, go ahead and advance, please. Okay, so there are two reports that come out of the audit, one being the financial statements, the other one being the management report. Within the financial statements is the auditor's opinion, and you see here one of the paragraphs taken from that, and it says, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the Bear Valley Community Services District as of June 30th, 2020. So we're providing you a clean or unmodified opinion. So congratulations on that. There we go. Okay, the other document I alluded to was the management report. That is the auditor's communication to the board. You've heard me say it before, I'll say it again. You are our boss, not management. We're hired by you essentially, and it's your best interest that we have in mind when we're conducting the audit and reporting. The management report is our opportunity to bring anything to your attention we feel is a material weakness or other issue. And I'm happy to say that we did not identify a material weakness within the district's internal control structure, structure at June 30th, 2020. So congratulations on that. Go ahead and advance. There we go. Okay, so what you see here is the condensed statements of net position. So essentially what we have here are the governmental activities and the business type activities by year in the total district. And you can see total assets of $29,642,000. And I'm going to round these numbers to a degree, and we can see that they went down as compared to the prior year, approximately $758,000. Deferred inflows or outflows of resources, the line underneath it, has to do with the pension obligation. There's a 1 year lag in between the actual year that's being reported and the actuarial that is provided. So to make up for that year lag, this deferred outflows of resources line item is included. So essentially the amounts that you see in that 2020 column will be applied to your liability next year, okay? And you can see that it actually went down approximately $29,000-$30,000 from the prior year. With regard to the liabilities, we can see the total liabilities of approximately $10,335,000, down approximately $355,000. Deferred inflows of resources, there again, that's related to pension obligation, but it has the opposite effect. Those amounts, barring any other adjustment going into next year, will be added to that liability calculation. Down below that is net position. That is essentially net worth. It's assets, deferred outflows, minus your liabilities, minus your deferred inflows of resources. Net worth, essentially, broken into three categories, basically what you've invested in your capital assets. So it's got what you've actually physically invested, cash, less depreciation, and less any outstanding debt on building those assets. And that's what that number represents. As you pay down debt and depreciate, that number changes, it basically decreases. I should say decreases as you amortize, increases as you pay down the debt, okay? Restricted, that are basically represents cash that is restricted for use to pay down debt or is to be applied to capital projects. Okay. Unrestricted is essentially what's left over. And as you can see, unrestricted in 2020, ending balance was 980,000. Net position at the end of the year was 19,953,000. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over this kind of briefly, and then we're going to switch to another page, and we'll kind of go through it's all written down. There's a narrative to kind of explain this, but here you see this is the condensed statements of activity. So this is the profit and loss side, the P&L. It shows the revenues and expenses. And you can see total revenues approximately right in the middle of the page, 2020 column of the 8.987 million, which is actually up approximately, and I'm looking at the column all the way to the far right, up approximately 1.562 million. What's making up a good chunk of that is the charges for services, and we'll take a look at that on the next page. Total expenses, 9,473,000, up approximately 1.589 million. Working our way down, and I'm looking in that total district. This would be the third column from the right. There's a line item 3, it's third up from the bottom, it says change in net position. And you can see it's a decrease of 486,181. And that's in essence your net profit or net loss for the year. And we'll go into what drove that on the next pages. Go ahead and go to the next page, please. Okay, so basically we have a narrative here explaining what we just saw on the previous page. And as we disclosed, net position decreased by approximately 486,000 as a result of the current year operations. Total revenues from all sources increased 5.62 million. What makes up your revenues are program revenues and general revenues. Program revenues are essentially what you do for a living, providing services. General revenues are things like taxes, interest earnings, and such. Total revenues from all sources increased 1.562 million to that 8.9 million. Program revenues increased by 1.566 million, primarily due to increases of 1.502 million in charges for services and 56,000 in capital grants and contributions. The increase in charges for services of 1.5 was primarily due to 1.324 in water consumption sales, 63,000 in general government, 60,000 in public safety charges, 24,000 in wastewater service charges, and 23,000 in street and road charges when compared to the prior year. The increase in capital grants and contributions of 56,000 was primarily due to increases of water and wastewater capacity charges of 45,000. When we were talking about the restricted cash, this would be one of the restricted cash type items that would be applicable or would be applied to capital projects. General revenues, there again, interest earnings and such, decreased by approximately 4,000, primarily due to decreases of 12,000 in interest earnings, 8,000 in voter approved taxes, offset by an increase of approximately 17,000 in property taxes as compared to the prior year. So it's pretty straightforward on the revenue side. Go ahead and go to the next page, please. All right. So with regard to the total expenses, now these aren't broken out by program and general. They're basically all grouped together in the presentation, but you can see they increased by 1,589,975 to the 9.473 million. Increase was due primarily to increases of 786,000 in general government, 224,000 in public safety, 378,000 in streets and roads, 119,000 in water expenses, 132,000 in solid waste expenses, which were offset by a decrease of approximately 42,000 in wastewater expenses as compared to the prior year. Now, I don't really want to muddy the waters. We went through this in the Finance Committee the other week, and what I commented on was, there were general expense increases. Inflation does that as we're moving forward, coming out of the lockdown and stuff and such. But I did note that there was a non-cash increase in pension expense, which was applied across the various funds. And there again, I don't want to make too much of this because it's primarily a non-cash charge. The non-cash portion was approximately $605,000. Now, this is non-cash. You didn't actually pay cash. This is just a reflection of the changes in the actuarial valuation that is done every year. So it's not something you could affect. It's basically just the results of the actuarial valuation. And as I disclosed, that amount or those amounts were applied across the various funds according to management's plan, basically. So nothing really to go on about with regard to that. So if you have the ability to back up a couple of slides, that would be great. Yeah, okay. So basically, as we said, total revenues, we can see the increase of 1.5 million. Total expenses, the increase of 1.589 million. And the change in net position there again, 800, it's a decrease of 486,000. A good portion of that resulting from that pension increase. So, but that's essentially it. They look pretty good solid financials. Kind of a review here. As Hamid said, we did the audit remotely. I think it went really well, and kudos to everybody that was involved. Thank you so much. We were able to provide a unmodified opinion, and we did not identify a material weakness within your internal controls. And that essentially is my report.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. And congratulations to you, Hamed, and your staff for making this possible. Do you have anything to add before I open it up to public comments, Mr. Jones?
I do not. Just more of the going forward. We're required to file the financial statements with State Controller's Office and the Kern County Auditor Controller's Office within 12 months after the end of our fiscal year. So we're well within that. So upon acceptance, we will be forwarding those onto those agencies to satisfy our requirements, and available for any other questions you may have.
All right, thanks for that. Congratulations again. Yes.
If I might, I concur with your recognition of Mr. Jones, and I guess I had a question for Chris. Just, you've been doing our audits for several years, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes.
And as you first came here 3 or 4 years ago, and I've been here a couple now, but it seems to me we have continually improved to the point where I don't remember situations where there was nothing in a management letter. There's typically something. So I think that is really an accomplishment for us and for Hamed and the team. But I guess my question kind of revolved around, have you been seeing declining instances of areas for comment?
Well, yeah, that's a really good question. And the way I kind of look at it is, I think the board and management has been very responsive to our comments in the past, very receptive. So several years ago, I believe we came across a couple of items that we were brought to your attention. I don't recall them off the top of my head, but management, the board was very responsive in basically taking that situation, making the modifications necessary. So what that's telling me is it's a good relationship, that management is taking our advice and making those corrections that are necessary. Each year when we come in, the supervisor, and in this case it's Jeff Palmer, will basically make note of anything we come across when doing our testing throughout the whole engagement, and we'll meet with management and go over those things. They tend to be, or at least this year, they've tended to be very, very minor things that would not need to be, raised to the board level. Things like, okay, I'm making this up off the top of my head here, but we saw that the date somebody signed off on something, the approval date was longer than what we were expecting. And there again, I'm just making that up just for a point's sake, but nothing that would be raised to the board's level with regard to material weakness. So there again, I would say management's been very responsive in addressing items in the past that we've brought to their attention. And that's fantastic. That means the system's working. This is what it means to me.
Good.
All right, thank you for that. Mr. Mellon, go ahead.
I'm having some technical difficulties, Mr. President, Mr. Jones, and it looks like one of them is my camera. So
We can hear you.
thank you. So I appreciate that, Chris, and again, Hamid, Perla, everyone involved there. Thank you. Excellent job.
Right, we'll carry on with staff comments or questions, and then I see one hand in the public from Ms. Kinnear, but let's, anything else from staff? Great. Christy, will you turn the floor over to Kathy Kinnear, please?
Did you want to hear from the board?
I'll do the board last.
Okay. Kathy Kinnear.
Thank you and congratulations to Hamid and all of the staff who worked hard to get this clean audit. One question, I know that under some standard accounting guidelines that you need to change auditors after 3 or 5 years. I'm not sure what the criteria is for the association, but I just wanted to make sure that it's not a reflection on the firm or their work. It's only a audit guideline. So just to bring that to everyone's attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. I think it was 7 years. Am I right about that?
Want me to jump in?
Go ahead, please, Mr. Brown.
Yes, it's up to 6 continuous years, and the legislation basically calls for either the change of firm or at a minimum change of partner, lead partner. And as an example, we've got several clients that we've had for multiple years, and that's the way it's being approached is if I've been the partner on the engagement going into the 7th year, in the one that just pops into my head, I won't give you the name, but Andy Beck will become the partner with regard to that engagement. And likewise, for engagements where he's been for an extended period of time, I will be the partner. But that's essentially what the guidelines are.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Comments from the board?
Honorable President, I don't have anything really to add. We did consider this at the Finance Committee meeting. I believe it was last week, as Chris had indicated. Just wanted to again echo all the sentiments to thank Chris and his team, as well as Hamid and his staff. And Hamid, I might encourage you to kind of call out some of the folks that had a key role in providing all the information and interacting with Chris to get us to this point of a clean audit.
Yes, I'll say it was a lot of work done by our accountant, Perla Fichter. She was the main contact with our auditor and very timely in providing everything that they need. But really all the staff, even our billing clerks, Lori Carlin and Denise Yelishitz, they have roles in providing documents relating to billing. You know, it really encompasses everything, and even down to our office assistant, Danielle Woods. So it was really a team effort, and I do thank them.
Mr. President, I would, I have some comments, but I would request that you call on each board member individually, because some may be bashful to speak up, and that way that gives them an opportunity to speak. But I will speak now. Thank you, Hamid, and your whole team. As usual, you have performed beyond expectations. Congratulations to everybody, and please keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Roberts. Director Jensen, anything?
I have no comments.
Appreciate that. I have nothing to add. I've already issued my congratulations, but a question, since there was a finance committee meeting, there might need to be an agenda item for a finance committee report. Director Grace is the chair of that committee. Would there be anything to add that happened at the finance committee, or have we covered it?
I think we've generally covered it, Honorable President. There was some significant community input, just general questions about process. We did talk, Chris was good enough to give us a detail in the process, not only the map, but some of the challenges he was facing with COVID and interacting via email versus in person, which is the typical protocol for an audit like this. But generally, that might be the only thing I would add. I think Chris gave a good presentation this evening that mirrored what we saw at the Finance Committee. So with some of those details, that might be the only components I would add.
President Hahn?
Yes, Christy, go ahead.
There will also be a committee report on the consent agenda for next month's board meeting.
Okay, got it. That's where I would see that. Thank you so much. Great. Mr. Brown, thank you so much. I'll move to item B, which is for the adoption of the resolution, and I'll open the floor for motions here.
Yes, Mr. President, I move the Board of Directors adopt Resolution 20/21-21 and accept the annual financial report, external audit as prepared and presented by FEDAC and Brown LLP, and authorize staff to file as required.
And I would second.
I have a motion by Vice President Roberts and a second by Director Grace. Roll call vote, please.
Director Grace?
Aye.
Director Jensen?
Aye.
Vice President Roberts?
Aye.
President Hahn?
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Item number 10, presentation by Cobalt Community Services for the 2020 Bear Valley Community Engagement Study results as prepared by Cobalt Community Services. I'm going to try the name, but if I'm wrong in the pronunciation, please correct me. Mr. Saint Amour.
You did a great job. Perfect. All right, I believe you're going to transition so I could share the display on my site.
Okay, Bill, did you want to say anything about the staff report, or go ahead and go to the
Maybe just briefly. Thanks, Christy, for reminding us. But Mr. President, members of the board, as you know, we contracted with Cobalt Community Research and did I would say, a very extensive outreach to our community to better understand their levels of satisfaction with what it is we do. And I apologize, my camera is on the fritz here, but hopefully you can hear me all right. And our results came in, and that's why we're here tonight, so that Mr. St. Amour can kind of go over it, because it is statistically related and or valid and reliant. So there are some aspects of it that really are the scientific world. And so he can do that better than I, but I would say we're pleased with the results. Gives us good information with which to move forward with our strategic planning and goal setting. And it's a good start. And so we really appreciated what they did, and look forward to hearing and seeing the presentation. Thank you.
able to share now?
Let's see. Are you able to see the screen?
I can, yes.
Yep.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to share these results with you, especially with the first year study like this. You had really strong results. Your community was very responsive in terms of participating and also sharing their experiences that they've had with you. So overall, I think it was a really positive thing. It reflected well on the community. It reflected well on the folks who live there. So briefly, some background on Cobalt. So we're a 501c3. We work across the country on projects very much like this one. Why research matters? We always like to talk about this a little bit. It is really a best practice to improve performance, to make sure that you understand what are the key drivers of outcomes for your residents, outcomes like remaining in the community and recommending it to others and those kinds of things. We want to make sure that you have credible, independent data that really does help you understand the priorities and balances some of the more vocal groups with the overall feelings of your residents. Because sometimes those things that you hear, they may be representative or they may not. And it's important to have this kind of context so that you understand what are the things that residents really would like to see you move forward on. It's a very important tool for planning and also for communications. And I think there's a lot of things in here from a communication standpoint that staff will really be able to dig into and move forward with. And ultimately, you know, this kind of practice just builds trust with your community. You give them the opportunity to share their thoughts, and then they'll be able to see those thoughts translated into action over the coming years. So let me talk about the goals specific to this study. So we wanted to make sure that we gave you some solid information to support the budgetary and strategic planning decisions that you're looking at. Really using a high quality methodology that's really an international standard in terms of how we do that. We wanted to make sure that you had a really solid baseline measurement. So as you're making improvements over the next few years, you can see where that progress occurs. We wanted to do a bit more regression on that to identify, you know, what are the areas, the experiences that residents have that have the most impact and the most leverage on overall satisfaction and the kind of outcomes that you care about, like remaining in the community and recommending to others. And then I think the last piece is particularly important with as crazy as 2020 has been. I'm giving you some context for how your scores compared to the rest of the country and for the region. So as economic and political and social things change, scores go up and down for communities that really have no basis in what communities are doing. It's just, you know, part of the environment. And so having this index allows you to see, you know, how are you performing compared to that index? Are you beating the index? Are you underperforming? How does that line up? Next slide is really just diving into that with a little bit more detail in terms of the experience. So, you know, there's a number of benefits. I won't read these through, but one thing I do want to point out is this little graph. This is an example of what you could expect, you know, over time as you continue to make these improvements. This is one of our clients out of Washington State. And when we first started working with them a number of years ago, they were this blue line and they were underperforming, you know, all of the indices. And they continuously looked at the data. They made action plans based on the data. They made sure that their communication was as clean as it could be. And you can see now they're just continuing to outperform the index year after year. It's been a great story for them. So talking a little bit about the ACSI, which is part of the work that we do. So the ACSI, it's a national standard. It's actually international because they do this with a number of different countries and regions globally. But for the US, they measure about 40 different industries. It's very well respected from a scholarly standpoint. This is one of the quarterly metrics that's reported out by the University of Michigan, like the various consumer kind of measurements. If you want more information on it, you can go to the website, theacsi.org, where there's just a rich variety of information that you can look at. Some of the organizations that are measured with the ACSI include Apple, Bank of America, Subaru, Chick-fil-A. So, and this is just a sample of them. So you can go out to the website and see all of them along with their scores if you're interested. To give you some sample of their scores, you can see, you know, Apple and Amazon are both in the 80s, but typically the range that we see are, you know, from the high 50s, low 60s to the low 80s. That's typically where most organizations perform. Public entities often are performing a bit lower than that just because you're not picking your market, you're not picking your customers. You have to provide a broad range of services to everyone. And so just a little bit different from what the private sector is doing. On the public side, some of the agencies measured by the ACSI include the Department of Education, the National Weather Service, the IRS, and a number of others. And again, the whole list is out there on their website. A number of tools that you have that's available in your report, and also if you need more information outside of the report, we break down all of the information by just a whole series of demographic groups and cohorts so that every question in the survey is really broken apart for each of those. That way their voices are not being washed out in an overall score. You're able to have those comparison scores, as I mentioned, with other local governments that are part of the Western Index and with the US Index. And then you can compared to some of those non-governmental comparables. And the reason that you might want to do that is because your residents often don't compare the experience they have with you with other communities that they may have lived in. They compare their experience with you with other organizations they do business with, whether it's a bank or some other kind of entity. So it allows you to have that kind of context. On the methodology side, we mailed this to about 2,800 homes that are listed in your records. We did 2 mailings in November and December. Folks could respond either online or via a postage paid envelope. We heard back from a very strong, 1,220 residents. That's about 44.1%. That gives us a conventional margin of error of about 2.1%, which is a really strong response rate. So typically what we see from a Cobalt perspective is, 20 to 25% range. So the fact that you have 1,220 folks responding just speaks very well for your community. One of the questions that often come up is, for a community our size, is that a large enough response to be able to make some generalized kind of decisions that is statistically significant? And for a random sample of the United States to get plus or minus 5%, you only need 384 responses to really mirror the population of the entire nation. So the fact that you have over 1,200 really puts you in a strong position. All right, let's start diving into some of the results. So this particular page is just designed to give you a little bit more context. So we see the US benchmark overall, we see the Western benchmark for similarly sized communities, then we see your scores. And on your scores, we baked in the plus or minus 2%, just so you can kind of see what that looks like. But if we look at the local government scores, nationally at 61, for the West it's 55, your score is a 59. So again, it's that 57 to 61 range based on the margin of error. But essentially you're doing really well, particularly compared to your key index, which is that Western benchmark for similarly sized communities. This scale goes again from 0 to 100. And typically, we're seeing things in the high 50s to the low 80s for the most part. If we look at community satisfaction, so this is, not just necessarily local government, you can see how those scores look. So you're performing pretty well compared to that. If we look at the professionalism of staff, so just looking specifically at local government staff, you can see mid 60s for the comparables and a 71 for Bear Valley specifically. And then for additional context, you can see the county government scores, state scores, federal government, which is not federal government overall. This is based on experience with specific federal agencies. Then the national index, which includes the private, which again are typically a bit higher than what public sector scores are. This slide is really going to sum up the key findings that I'll be going through in more detail here over the next few minutes. But just to hit you with the headlines, number one, you're above or near the key benchmarks for most of the questions in the survey. Your community outperformed all of the benchmarks for community image, and I'll go over those in more detail, but clearly residents really care about the area. They like living in the community. When we look at the scores for local government management, specifically, you're above or near those key benchmarks. But this is an area that is really highly leveraged. So there's some opportunity for process improvements here that will pay off for you as you work into the future. Some examples, for example, is improved communication on how tax dollars are used, talking about the spending decisions, talking about how community feedback is received into the planning process and how it is translated into action. Those are some of the things that came through. Other major drivers based on the experiences that folks have had in the community, road maintenance, garbage services, recycling, drinking water quality, and safety education were really the ones that came out the most. One of the questions that we asked is, generally, as you're looking at your budget, are residents interested in cutting services to have lower costs? Are they interested in paying a little bit more to maintain services, paying a little bit more to enhance services, and a number of different options? And most strongly, we saw that residents were interested in or willing to pay a little bit more to maintain or to improve service levels. There were very few residents that were interested in eliminating or reducing service levels. So this particular page is just a tiny, tiny little snapshot of what the crosstabs look like, the thermal maps that we use that give you every demographic group in the survey. So what we do is for the columns in this, and this should be in your packet, every question has its own column. You have the overall score, and then for all of the different demographic groups, they have their own row. And so what it allows you to do is for each of these questions, to kind of triangulate and see how that particular cohort felt regarding that particular service. And then we color code this so that you can see, when scores are high, they're bluish. When they're lower, they're in this red pink kind of thing. If you're to drop down a column, you can see, are the scores consistently red or consistently blue? And this tells you that regardless of demographic cohort, people had pretty consistent experiences with the community. If we see a bit more checkering, it's a little bit washed out here, but some of these are a little bit lower and a little bit pinker. It's telling you that there are some differences with some of those cohorts. And this is an opportunity to have a little bit more discussion with staff. Maybe talk to some additional folks out in the community as you're out and about to find out a little bit more about what their experiences are with this particular service and what specific recommendations they would have to improve it. So this is an extremely useful tool in the report because this is what you're ultimately going to be using to drive action going forward. We're going to have a number of these kinds of graphs that we're going to go through in the summary today. Let me just show you how to read it real quick. First of all, the dark blue lines, these are the Bear Valley scores. The pink line is your key index to pay attention to. This is for similarly sized communities in the western region of the United States. These other lines, the dark green is national, light green is national for similarly sized communities, the red is western overall. So at the image level, a couple of things stand out. First of all, you can see your scores in blue typically are above all of these benchmarks. In fact, they are above all of the benchmarks. There are some graphs throughout where you'll see some gaps like this one. A safe place to ride your horse is not one of the benchmarking questions. So that's something that's certainly unusual about your community, but it's an important thing to ask. It's an important part of your character. And it's an important thing to have as a piece of your baseline as you're looking at improving services in the future. Future intentions, we asked folks in the next 5 years, how likely are they to recommend the community as a place to live, to remain in the community, to volunteer, support the local government administration. So you can see the scores compared to this pink bar, which is the key one to pay attention to. For the most part, you're outperforming that particular benchmark. A little bit softer in volunteering, not surprising. We've seen this all throughout 2020. For some reason, people aren't volunteering a lot. Remaining in the community, that one was also a little bit soft. I spent a little bit of time just looking to see what are the characteristics of the folks that mark that low. And typically there's the folks that are 1 to 5 years from retirement with a lower household income. Those are the folks that are a little bit more shaky in terms of remaining in the community. We had an open-ended question asking folks about their favorite things about Bear Valley. We took all of those comments and we dropped them into a word cloud software. So the words that were mentioned the most are the largest in this particular cloud. And so then we just took a look at what are some of the themes behind these words. So you can see the wildlife beauty being huge right there in the middle. Ultimately, the community really is in love with the area. So they love the wildlife, the environment, all of the things that it brings with it. They love the quiet, the privacy. They like to have the gate. It helps them feel safe and secure. And they love the trails. So the equestrian opportunities, the ability to go hiking, all of those kind of things are, just over and over again. These are themes of what they like about living there in Bear Valley. One of the things that we do is we take all of the experiences and then we correlate them with overall satisfaction, and we put them into this particular scatter plot. So ultimately on the vertical, you're going to have the performance in terms of how well they scored you based on their experiences. And across the horizontal is going to be the strength of the linkage with overall satisfaction. So ultimately what you end up with are kind of strategic opportunities on the right-hand side, things that have the most leverage to improve going into the future. And then you've got, things that are a little bit weaker and a little bit stronger based on which particular quadrant they land in. These are not hard and fast boundaries when we look at the scores themselves. This is just really helping you from an analytical standpoint, see the relative strength of each score to the next. And so this is what we're looking at. So the performance ratings, when we did this particular analysis, go from 1 to 10. Correlation goes from 0 to 1. So things over here that are more strongly correlated, we're looking at a number of things that deal with local government management. That's kind of these purpley things. Right in the dead center, these are dealing with tax. This 3 floating down here in this quadrant is dealing with street maintenance and repair, which is going to be a theme that comes up quite a bit in the presentation. So it's a little hard to see, but a couple of things I point out before I zoom in on this cluster is if we look at the midpoint, most of the experiences are above the midpoint. And everything certainly has a certain amount of connection with overall satisfaction. So these are all things that help you, make some relative choices. If I zoom into the cluster and you can see the axes have changed, these are the areas that I really see as the strategic opportunities going forward. So there's a number of specific things for local government management. So I'm not going to read them all through you, but just to kind of guide your review as you take this report with you home. There's some issues here with taxes and the roads. And I think these are all linked based on the themes of all of the different questions. So if we're looking at taxes, for example, overall is the darker bubble. 21 is the amount and quality of services received for taxes you pay. 22 here is communication on how tax dollars are used. So we see that with things like number 28, which is perception of spending dollars wisely. I think the theme is really spending more time doing the storytelling, making sure that people do understand what that process is, how the resources are allocated, and ultimately helping them to see the improvements that have been made. And roads being one area in particular that came up quite a bit in the survey. All right, so next thing we're going to do is dive into some of the specific areas that the dimensions of experience that folks have had. And public safety is one of those. And so at a high level, we see fire prevention education, so it's a little bit below the benchmarks, but you can see everything else is above that pink benchmark. Safety education is probably one of the softer scores, but again, it's still above that benchmark. Looking at transportation infrastructure, you can see the overall over here, you're doing well. Street maintenance and repair. This is the thing that came up over and over again in different areas of the survey. So this is something that you'll want to pay quite a bit more attention to. Road signage also a bit softer than the other scores. The other scores were pretty solid as far as congestion, ease of using the gatehouse, and the gatehouse pass system. Although there are some comments and there's some things that you might think about improving down the road. Just some other information that we grabbed while we were looking at some of these experiences. We want to know what the primary winter driving vehicle is. And we have, a little over 50% use a 4-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. Looking at utilities. So this is the utility services overall, but the drinking water quality is one thing that was marked particularly low. Sewer services isn't part of the benchmarking, but you've got it there as a baseline for moving forward. Garbage collection was a bit softer. Recycling services were a bit softer as well. Brush high, manure disposal. Again, not part of our standard benchmarking, but you can see your performance there is very solid. We want to dive into the water use a little bit more to see how people were using it. And bottled water, almost 70% of folks in the community are using that for drinking. Only about 30% aren't using drinking water or bottled water at all. How often do they take trash to the transfer station? So most typically once or twice a week. How often do they use the manure facilities? Overwhelmingly, they are not widely used by about 85%, but for those who do use it, it's typically once a week or once every couple of weeks. Looking at the green waste facilities, typically people use them 3 to 4 times a year or monthly. Only a small percentage of folks, about 15%, say that they never use those facilities. Paid property taxes, so the responses overall were taxpayers. And when we looked at taxes, this is where we saw some of those other bubbles. Property taxes overall, amount and quality of services that you receive for the taxes paid, and the communications. So you can see these are a little bit softer than what the benchmarks are. We asked them generally what kind of approach do they support to balance the service levels that they receive with the taxes that they pay. And what we saw is that, and this is multiple response, but the plurality of folks, almost 50%, are willing to enhance or improve local services with a small tax or fee increase. And from a maintenance standpoint, they're also willing to maintain local services with a small tax or fee increase. When we looked at privatization kind of options, there were a couple of options there, but if taxes and fees can be kept the same, that's one reason for supporting the privatization, a little bit softer in terms of privatizing if the taxes and fees can be decreased. But here we see that there are very few folks that supported eliminating services or reducing service levels. So really the key themes are people are willing to pay a little bit more or to privatize. Looking at local government management itself. So we see a pattern that we've seen in a lot of places where the blue lines are generally outperforming the pink lines. A couple of major landmarks that I just wanted to point out real quick. A level of professionalism of local staff, very, very high. This is certainly your highest mark. And along with that, follow-up provided by staff, ease of getting your question answered. The areas that were a bit softer, spending dollars wisely. And again, I think that's really a communications kind of thing just to work on focusing. And then encouraging citizen ideas and involvement. And certainly this particular project has been one step in doing that. And so that's something that you'll want to keep doing as far as just overall engagement kind of activities, then reflecting the information back to folks in your communications. That's something for you to keep working on in the future. How often have they contacted Bear Valley Community Service District in the past year? And this is through a number of different modes, but fewer than 6 times a year for most of the residents in the community. How do they prefer to receive information? Email, far and away the #1 thing, mailing's #2, followed by text message. And this is broken down by demographics. So really you can dial in based on the particular message that you're sending and the particular group that you're trying to reach. We looked at the Bare Necessities newsletter and are they subscribed to it? We can see about 36% say yes, and a large number of folks didn't even know about it. So again, there's a great opportunity here to enhance the communications. We explored a little bit about internet service at home. So we can see a large group of folks do have fiber optic, and then you can see the breakdown of some of the other modes of internet access. How do they access? Which device do they use? For the most part, people are using a smartphone or a laptop. What do they use to enter guest passes? So call-in is still the #1 way of doing that. There are some significant differences by age based on this, so that's something to pay a little bit of attention to, and mobile app being #2. We asked also, what is the one improvement that would most improve their experience living in Bear Valley? And again, we've got a word cloud with the things popping up that were the biggest themes. And road maintenance was certainly the thing that came up the most. So a number of different comments related to roads. So residents are concerned about the roads. They would like road repair, particularly from water damage. And also there's a lot of conversation about emergency fire exits. There was some conversation about more traffic enforcement and reducing the speed that people use to travel through the community. So all of that, it has to do with the roads, but particularly road maintenance. Water also came up in a number of different ways. Residents noted water leaks and the time required to fix them. There were a number of comments regarding water quality, some of which you may not be able to help, just the nature of the groundwater there, and water costs as well. So those are the summer results. This last slide is really just talking about a process of taking this information, starting to digest it and put it into practice. So the first thing that you've done is you've measured. So that's always the first step. The next thing that we recommend is as you go through this information, identify what are the 1 or 2 things that you really want to focus on to change between now and the next time you might measure this. And this often works well in a small group, whether it's, the senior leadership group or working with others, different workshops. Look at those things that you identified, those 2 or 3 things, and then take a sheet and identify, just brainstorm out, why did people respond the way that they did? And then take the next sheet and start brainstorming the things that you could do differently to try to improve the experiences based on why people responded. So that's really the step 2. Step 3 is validation and confirming, which is where you're expanding that conversation out. You might be pulling in some residents, having some conversations, certainly pulling in line staff and saying, okay, these are the things we want to change. These are why we think people responded that way. These are some of the things that we identified as being ways of improving it going forward. Then asking 2 key questions. Number 1, what did we miss? And number 2, of this list of potential actions going forward, what are the 1 or 2 things that would have the most impact? Because you really want to focus down. So after step 3, the next step is training. So based on those 1 or 2 things that you really want to drive forward, who's going to implement it, and what are the skills and tools that they need to have to be able to drive those forward. Step 5 is the implementation. This is project management. This is putting certain deliverables on a time frame, and then just making sure that those are reported on a regular basis up to this group, so that you see that the progress is happening. And then at some point you come back and measure again, see, number 1, are residents seeing those kind of improvements? And number 2, have priorities shifted as the economic and political and social landscape changes? All right, so that was the quick review of the results. There's a lot that you're going to have to digest on your own. Certainly I'm going to be available if there are questions, if there's additional detail that you want, and staff would be coordinating those to make sure that all of those answers are provided. But are there any additional questions?
Thank you so much for that, Mr. St. Amour. I'll also encourage the public that this is only a portion of the report that is in the board package that you can find on the website. There's tons more data, especially the demographics that Mr. St. Amour mentioned. Let's go to staff. Staff comments or questions? Great. I see 1 hand in the public. Christy? 2 hands in the public?
Excuse me, Fred Hicks.
Go ahead, Mr. Hicks. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. First, congratulations for everybody for doing this and getting a phenomenal response rate back. You did an exceptional job there. My question is on page 11 when it comes to methodology. Specifically, did you have 1,220 residents respond, or did you have 1,220 households respond?
Those households.
Right, that's what I thought, because when I had read the numbers, I thought that's household where the residents are at. So thank you for clarifying that for me.
You're welcome.
Good question, Mr. Hicks. Thank you. Kathy Kinnear has her hand up too.
Okay, Kathy.
Thank you very much. I think this was an important step for the CSD, and I'm really looking forward to an opportunity to have community involvement with the board as you move forward with whatever the next steps are. I think there are interested people, and I think everyone wants to work to better our community. So thank you, and I look forward to joining you all.
Thank you, Kathy. Sure appreciate that comment. Let's go to board. I'll just go like Vice President Roberts suggested. I'll just go alphabetically, and then if you want me to come back to you, I'm happy to do that as well. But Director Grace.
It'd be great if I could get off mute. Yes, Honorable President, I appreciate that. This is great information. I really salute the residents that responded and took the time. This is how we hear from you. Certainly, we know the issues of our own accord, but this is how we hear from you as to what's important to each household, and this gives us the tools to respond. So I look forward to our strategic planning sessions, 2 sessions next month, and appreciate any help in synthesizing this data. And just again, thank you to the community. That's all I have, Mr. President.
Thank you, Director Grace. Director Jensen, you have anything?
Just a couple of questions for Mr. Sanamore. There are several topics like public safety where the surveyee is asked to answer questions that if they've never had any contact with law enforcement, there really isn't an option to answer that. Can you speak to that?
Sure. In the survey instrument itself, there was an opportunity for them to check don't know.
So that would be the proper answer if they didn't have any contact, just don't know?
If they don't know, now there's also experiences that friends and family have had, and that could make its way into the survey. So it might not have been their personal experience. The other thing that happens is you run into, particularly in a first survey like this, a certain amount of experiential inertia. So they may have had experiences in past years they've carried forward, that they haven't had any new experiences that have changed their perceptions. And so this is probably capturing some of that as well.
Okay. And to that same section, does this have a measurement of utilization at all, or is it strictly just satisfaction?
This is just satisfaction.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Director Jensen. Was that it?
Yes, that's it.
Great. Vice President Roberts.
Thank you. Very eye-opening. You know, a lot of these things, the staff and board members knew, but didn't really realize that it's, you know, this is 44% of the community, that they all feel the same way. It's that silent majority that's staying silent. And this, you know, this speaks loud and clearly for me. We know the roads are a major issue for all of us. We have been trying to tackle how do we solve the problem with you know, we're 50 years old, 51 years old, and there has been a neglect in the first 40 years, let's say, and it's come home to roost with this bunch now, and this really helps us to focus, laser focus in on what the community is feeling. So I really appreciate this. It's something for us to really dig into and analyze this and then take action. So thank you so much for the hard work.
Thank you, Vice President Roberts. I have just, I'd like to add that I would support future budget items to keep this up, say annually or biannually, something, and then see how that trend develops in these areas so we can measure. We know where we are at this moment in time, but let's measure how we're improving or not, so that we can focus efforts to make sure that blue line goes up like it did in Washington. I would support that very much. And Mr. Malinan, did you have something?
Yes, if you're done, Mr. President, I wanted to just piggyback on that a little bit and share with the board and the public what my thoughts are. And
Thanks.
that is that we are going into a process of doing some strategic planning, taking this data and using it to kind of chart the course. Certainly one of our challenges, like probably most communities in America, but resources and the lack of it. And so you have to prioritize where you're going to put your nickels and dimes. This helps us do that. But relative to your point about recurring, my idea, and we can talk about this more later, is into 2-year cycles. And I've done this elsewhere where I think it's successful and it's helpful because we spend a bulk of time every year doing budgeting. And if we could have a biennial budget, the second year, instead of devoting our time and energies to budgeting, because the bulk of our budgets are really relatively set and slightly incremental based on some CPI or inflation, et cetera. It's not hard to do a second year budget. But what it does is it frees us up to do strategic planning. And so we get into the habit of planning and using a biennial survey to do that. So you get into a 2-year cycle. I know you mentioned every year. I'm throwing out maybe every other year, and we begin to set up plans for every 2, 4, 6. Begin to align our budgeting with our strategic planning. And yes, every 2 years we'll see if we move the marker up a little bit on some of those levels that we wanted to see moved. So a little preview kind of where I see us hopefully heading, and I'll be glad to get into that in more detail with the board and the community as we approach it. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mellon. And on behalf of the district and the staff and the board and the members of the public, Mr. St. Amour, thank you so much for a very detailed report. And thank you for your time tonight.
It's my pleasure. It was a pleasure to work with the community and with staff. So I look forward to hopefully having the opportunity to do it in 2 years.
Okay, all right.
For sure.
Take care. Have a great night.
Thanks, Will.
You're welcome.
Great. So that closes item 10. Action items number 11, introduce ordinance 20-254, amending section 1-5-10 Charlie of Chapter 5, Board of Directors of Title 1 of the District Code to remove the Communications Committee from the list of standing committees. Christie.
All right, sorry, let me get my, I am sharing. Can you see the package?
Yes.
Okay.
You got it.
All right, sorry about that. Okay, this item is coming before the board, Mr. President, as a result of the board's January decision to disband the Communications Committee. The committee is currently included as a standing committee in the district's ordinance code, and it is tasked with informing property owners and residents of Bear Valley Springs of district policies and activities. Upon recommendation of the Communications Committee and approval of the board, these duties have been transferred to a communications specialist position. And in January of 2020, at the recommendation of the Communication Committee, the board voted to suspend meetings of the committee and revisit the question of its continued existence after 1 year. At last month's meeting, the board voted unanimously to disband the committee and directed staff to prepare the necessary code amendments, and that is what is before you this evening.
All right, thank you so much. I don't see any hands up in the public. Is there any staff comments to add to what Christie said? Don't see any. Board comments. Director Grace.
I have no comments, Honorable President.
Appreciate that. Director Jensen.
I have none, sir.
Vice President Roberts.
And I have nothing either.
Yeah, nothing to add. We've been at this for a year, and
Right.
I'm ready to entertain a motion to close this committee.
Absolutely.
To introduce ordinance 21-254.
Yeah, we're looking for a motion here. I think we are.
Honorable President, I'll make a motion. I move to introduce ordinance number 21-254, amending section 1-510C of Chapter 5, Board of Directors of Title I Administration of the District Code, and to bring the ordinance back for a second reading and adoption at the next board meeting.
I second that.
Motion by Director Grace, second by Vice President Roberts. Christie, roll call vote.
Director Grace,
Aye.
Director Jensen,
Aye.
Vice President Roberts,
Aye.
President Han.
I vote aye. Motion carries 4-0. Action item B, approve expenditure in the amount not to exceed $27,425 with the apparent lowest responsible bidder, San Joaquin Fence, for installation of Public Works yard fencing. Bill, Mr. Mellon.
Mr. President, members of the board, as you may recall, one of the items in our recent addendum number 7 to our lease with the Bear Valley Springs Association included the cost sharing of a fence around our perimeter. And I don't know if Christie, you can pull up the photo or the map showing this, but what we're looking to do, and I think we will achieve, is a securing of our CSD property and a differentiation between that area, which is Jack's Hole, part of the Addendum 7, shifted the maintenance responsibilities to the association, which in turn, I think, gives them some greater flexibility with water management. But this was a part of it. And so you can see where the existing fence around the transfer station in purple would be extended up and around on our north end and tie in. If we did not have that, you can actually see where there is an opening onto our CSD property. That does and has created some problems. Certainly, we've had more than our fair share of dumping of materials onto our property. And this would hopefully stop that from occurring and help, improve, I think, the appearance from the outside. So things that people are seeing, they wouldn't see any longer, and we'll continue to move to clean up the site. Nonetheless, it was agreed by the association and the district to share the costs. We went out and received essentially our quotes for this, and our responsible low bidder is San Joaquin Fence, $27,425. And we would proceed to issue the contract, proceed to give notice to the association of their share of that, which is on a 50-50 basis. And we would recommend approval by the board. I stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Malinan. Any additional staff comments or concerns? Hearing none from the public, seeing no hands. Got one hand. Christy, would you turn the floor to Fiona Nelson?
Go ahead.
Hi, Bill, once the fence is built.
Who's speaking, Greg?
This is a member from the public, Fiona Nelson.
Oh, okay.
Once the fence is in place, is there a way in which we can tell if somebody dumped something outside the fence area? I mean, I realize when you look at it that it is tempting for people to nip down there with the odd piece of concrete and hurl it onto a pile of concrete that's already there. So people maybe would do that, and once the fence is there, they won't be so tempted. But do any of the cameras, would they be able to monitor traffic going back there and maybe dumping concrete outside the fence?
Let me answer this way, Mr. President, if I might. We will continue to work to clean up that area of debris, and we will continue to look to have areas monitored around our property for any illegal, improper dumping, so that we might catch whomever it is and prosecute them to the fullest extent that we can, because they're not supposed to be doing it. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you for the question. Thank you for that answer. No more hands in the public. We'll turn it over to board. Director Grace.
Yeah, Bill, can you just kind of, for the public's benefit, explain what the composition of the fence is? I mean, at first glance, that might look like a lot of money. I think for any of us in the construction business, it's a deal. But just so the public understands what they're getting, I mean, is this chain link with black vinyl? Is it just typical chain link? What are they getting?
It is a chain link fence, Mr. President, Mr. Grace. And I believe, and Larry is tuned in, we'll have slats on it as well, similar to the transfer station fencing.
Good deal. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Grace. Director Jensen.
I have none.
Thank you, Vice President Roberts.
I'm happy to see this happening. So no other comment.
All right, and I have no comments or questions. Open for a motion here.
Yeah, Mr. President. I'm sorry, Mr. President, I move that the Board of Directors approve expenditure in the amount not to exceed $27,425 with the apparent lowest responsible bidder, San Joaquin Fence, for the installation of public works yard fencing, and authorize the necessary budget adjustments.
Second.
I heard a motion by Vice President Roberts, and I think the second was Director Jensen.
Yes.
Roll call vote, please, Christie.
Director Grace,
Aye.
Director Jensen,
Aye.
Vice President Roberts,
Aye.
President Han.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Item C under action items is accept quarterly investment report as of December 31, 2021. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, President Han. The investment report before you is the quarterly investment report ending December 31st, 2020. The balances shown in the district's investment accounts at December 31st was just over 6.9 million, and in its operating accounts, 539,000, for a total of 7.4 million. Compared to the previous quarter end at September 30th, that was an increase of 1.2 million. That's primarily due to the property taxes that the district received in December, offset a little bit by the debt service paid to the road loan. Also, just want to point out, you'll see a difference in the local agency investment fund, as well as the Kern County Treasury pool. So what we did is we withdrew money from our local agency investment fund, moved it into the Kern County Treasury pool because their paths had kind of crossed, and Kern County Treasury pool interest rate is exceeding the local agency investment fund. So that's the reason for those differences there. And following this on the next page is just the further detail that breaks down those balances by the district's various funds. And I'm available for any other questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Additional comments or questions from staff? Hearing none, going to the public, and I see no hands raised. Board comments, Director Grace.
I have no questions, Mr. President.
Thank you, Director Jensen.
I have none.
Vice President Roberts.
Well done, Hamid, as always.
Yeah, I second that. That's well done. Keep it up. Honorable fellow board members, how about a motion?
You're getting it on the screen. I want to give somebody else a chance to make a motion, please.
Yeah.
I'll take it. I move the Board of Directors accept the quarterly investment report as of December 31st, 2020.
I'll second.
A motion by Director Jensen and a second by Director Grace. Christie, roll call vote.
Director Grace,
Aye.
Director Jensen,
Aye.
Vice President Roberts,
Aye.
President Han.
Aye. That motion passes 4-0. Item 12, information and discussion items, which is in the letter A, California Special Districts Association Board of Directors nominations. Christie, Ms. McEwen.
Mr. President, members of the board, the district has been a longtime member of the California Special Districts Association, which is a not-for-profit association formed to promote good governance and improve local services. It provides education and training, legislative advocacy, and many other services. Their mission is providing members with resources necessary to best serve their communities. It is run by a board of directors elected from 6 geographical networks, each with 3 seats on the board, serving staggered 3-year terms. We are in the Central Network. CSDA has issued a call for nominations for the board of directors 2022 to 2024 term. Candidates must be board members or managerial employees of a member district located in their network. The district is not obligated to submit a nomination. However, we have brought this to the board tonight to provide the chance for discussion and to determine if any of our board members are interested in the opportunity. Discussion tonight should determine if interest exists, and if so, which specific nominees we should name. If that's the case, we will bring a resolution back in March for board action to formalize the nomination. And
Right. Go ahead.
time to discuss.
All right, I appreciate you bringing this before the board. I don't see any hands. Is there any additional staff? Probably not. Director Grace, do you have any comments here?
Not specifically, Mr. President. I would certainly support any of my fellow board members that would like to avail themselves and avail us of this benefit. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Director Jensen.
I have no comments about this.
Vice President Roberts.
Well, I think it's important, so I'm just looking at the commitments. You complete. Oh, you just moved it. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, one of the commitments or expectations is to complete all 4 modules of the CSDA's Special District Leadership Academy with 2 years of being elected. So that's, that's a commitment for whoever would like to do that. I think it's a good thing. I think we need to participate. And so I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. And our membership in the CSDA is extremely important. Previously, before COVID, I had attended 2 or 3 of their conventions, their annual meetings, and there's lots to be learned. The special district advocacy at the Sacramento level is really important. I'm not planning to throw my name forward, partly because I've already do this. I work full-time and I'm a part-time college student. So I don't think anyone is interested in putting their name forward. Do I have that correct? Right. We have our answer. Christy, you have your answer.
All righty.
Okay. Let's see. Item B is under information is board comments. Director Grace.
At this point, Mr. President, I don't think I have much to add this evening.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Director Jensen.
I don't have any comments either, sir.
Vice President Roberts.
For once, I'm speechless.
But that constitutes speech. I'm sorry, you didn't get it. No, I appreciate that. I have nothing to add. Staff reports, department heads, finance, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, President Hahn. The report that you have before you are the finance activity reports for period 6 or the month of December 2020. I do not have anything significant to point out, but I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Finance report questions, Director Grace.
Nothing for me, sir.
Director Jensen.
None, sir.
Vice President Roberts.
None.
I have none. I see no hands. Item 2 under department head reports is Public Works report.
Mr. President, members of the board, you have our report. I think it reflects a busy month, particularly for our roads crew with the weather and the snow and so on. But you have our report and we stand for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malinan. Additional staff, no hands in the public. Director Grace.
Just seeing a lot of asphalt going down, a lot of water lines getting repaired. So love to see that, obviously, and want to see more of it.
Great. I agree with that. Director Jensen.
I have nothing.
Vice President Roberts.
Just hats off to our Public Works crew. They're out there when it's cold, freezing, icy. They're doing an amazing job. They were on a job and I stopped by to just say hello and thank them. And, they just deserve all the credit that they can get. So thank you, guys.
Appreciate that. And I see some nods in concurrence with that. Same with me on the way up Skyline to my house. There was a crew working on a leak there. Stopped, thanked them. And they were grateful for that. So, all right, that's in the Public Works and Public Safety Report. Not best for last, perhaps. Chief Melanson.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Good evening. You have my public safety staff report for the month of January 2021. I won't go through the particulars of the report other than what I promised the last month. There were some incidents of interest. And again, I only choose these myself for a complete list of the different types of calls we were called to. That would be on page 2. But I do reference 2 incidents of interest that I selected: a drunk driving arrest and damage to CSD property. This occurred on January 31st in the evening hours. Our officer was dispatched to the area of Pinedale Drive and Lower Valley Road, where a resident believed they heard an accident occur. Officer got in the area and obviously saw the stop sign had been ripped down, and he soon after got a call on Cumberland of a vehicle that was got high centered off the road. Fire department had already arrived on scene, and we quickly determined who knocked down the stop sign. He also damaged a street sign that was found in his trunk of his car. So the subject was arrested for DUI. And again, not the most serious crime that we handled during the month, but it was an interesting one. And the other one was a lost hiker. This one occurred actually the same day. No, it was a few days earlier. And into one of our residents was hiking on the Pinedale Trail. He got disoriented, got lost, called 911. Sheriff's dispatch got the call, and his battery was going dead. He didn't have a flashlight, and he didn't have any water, and he was not dressed for the elements. It wasn't extremely cold that night, but it was in the 50s, but it was dropping quickly. Our officer got on scene and dispatched or made a request for the sheriff's helicopter and sheriff's search and rescue assets, and warned them to bring warm clothes and ATVs. And so while on scene, the BVSA Ranger Rocco Spinoli, I don't know if everybody probably knows Rocco.
Yeah.
Yep.
Our officers are very familiar with Rocco. We work with him we work with him a lot. He's super knowledgeable about the area, and he's a very accomplished hiker and outdoorsman. We wouldn't normally have done this, but the officer on scene made the decision to allow Rocco, along with a sheriff's sergeant that lives in Bear Valley that showed up, to go ahead and proceed down the trailhead while our officers stayed at sort of a command post position. The helicopter soon got overhead, found the hiker, led Rocco and the sergeant to the hiker, walked him out. It was probably 4 miles back in there, and all was well. Sheriff's search and rescue arrived on scene, but they didn't need to deploy. So that was a good success that night. I got home safe. So with that, Mr. President, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chief Melanson, for that. I'll go to the public. There's one hand, Jiva. Christy, would you turn the floor over to Jiva?
Go ahead.
Hello.
Hi.
Question on page 239 of the police report, 901H, it says dead body, and then it has the number 1 there.
Okay.
So was there a dead body issue?
Yes. Yep. If you're curious about that, I'd be happy to provide you those details. I don't have the report in front of me.
Okay, because when you said incidents of interest, even though it may be private, I kind of thought that would be up there, but thank you. Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, me too, Jiva, and it happens more often than you might know up here.
I'm so sorry. Thank you,
You're welcome.
Chief.
Thank you, Jiva. Thank you, Chief, for that excellent report. General Counsel report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Per the agenda, we had our
Excuse me.
annual AB 1234 training.
Excuse me, you didn't get us.
I'm sorry. You're right, Vice President Robinson. I did not go to the board. So Director Grace, so sorry.
Yes, Mr. President. Chief, I just had one quick question, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but can you give us a really brief status on the new hire, the status of the new hire and recruiting?
Absolutely, Mr. President, Director Grace. We struggle with, sifting through these candidates, trying to find good ones. We still have one in background. We actually have 2 in background. We started a background just recently on another one. We will work through those backgrounds and continue to recruit, and hopefully this one that we have a little farther ahead in backgrounds works out.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you, Director Grace. Director Jensen?
Just to clarify on the dead body call, I've seen it show up in reporting like that before, and I think the public has a conception of a dead body as, you come across a dead body, and that's not necessarily the case. I mean, was this probably more of a death investigation where someone passed away in their home and they did a death investigation?
We did not come across a dead body.
Okay.
The way these are listed are is exactly as they are pulled from the sheriff's dispatchers call logs. So I don't change those. I want them to be just verbatim of what they send. So yes, to answer, I hope that answered your question.
It does, but I think more importantly for the public like Jiva, when you see that on that report, that's typically not what that means. People have a conception of that and think that, oh my gosh, someone came across a dead body, and that's typically not what happens. My other question was to dovetail on Director Grace's question. The two people in backgrounds, are those applicants that are already peace officers, or are they coming out of an academy somewhere?
Mr. President, Director Jensen, they are already police officers.
Okay. And in addition to a background investigation, will they also have to go through medical approval and things like that?
Yes, as part of the hiring process, we send them to a medical exam and a psychiatric exam.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your insight on that, Director Jensen. I appreciate that. Vice President Roberts.
Thank you. Hi, Chief. A quick question. You have on the report the item mail theft, and it says 2. So do we, I had a discussion with General Manager Mallon on my one-on-one, and we're talking about things like that. So do we know that it's mail theft? How do you categorize that? Because if someone calls up and say, gee, my mail is gone, how do we know that it's mail theft?
Mr. President, Director Roberts, that's a good question. I added mail thefts to my stats report over a year ago. It was actually during a time when we had a little rash of them.
Right.
And so in it to this day is absolutely the most underreported crime that occurs in Bear Valley. We've tried to do a lot of public education, as you know, to protect people from mail theft. And also, I don't know if this is part of your question, but really what we see is 90% plus of the mail thefts that are reported, they're package thefts. They're package thefts from the mailboxes. So yeah, I would love to get all of them reported so we could get better data as to where it occurs. But I've come to the conclusion it occurs all around the valley and in all of the 39 mail stations that we have.
Okay, so that's, for me, that's a discussion to continue on with the board and with the general manager. It's an ongoing issue. If it truly is mail theft, well then, we need to be looking at some options on how we help resolve that, because I see that as one of the problems that is plaguing us all. So anyway, thank you for that information.
You're welcome.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Vice President Roberts. I have nothing to add, and I'll now turn it over to General Counsel.
Thank you again, Mr. President. So as I started to say, as per the agenda, the board and staff, designated staff members did their AB 1234 training this afternoon. There are materials in the agenda for the public to see what that entails in terms of all the different regulations and rules that apply to public officials in the state. It's a lot. I want to commend the board and staff for sitting through the training, for a good discussion on a lot of the topics, and I think is reflected in the survey earlier, a healthy recognition in the community too of the professionalism of the staff here, and this is all part of it. So again, kudos to everyone, and I will be sending Christy your certificates, as I mentioned. I don't want to take the general manager's thunder because I think in his report, I've spent a lot of time the past month with him putting together the contract for the fuel grant program. And I know Bill wants to speak to that, but that's been teed up now, and that's going to be a very exciting development. We've gotten great cooperation from our forester and the logger that you selected as well. But again, I know Bill has a full report, and I believe you've seen some information on that already. So that's all I have this evening. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Dawn. Questions from staff? No, see no hands for general counsel. We won't forget the board this time. Director Grace.
Yeah, just to say thank you, Don, for your time today and the education, and much appreciated.
Very welcome.
Director Jensen.
I have nothing, sir.
Appreciate that. Vice President Roberts.
Thank you, Don. Job well done.
I echo that as well. Appreciate it, Dawn. Thanks a lot. Brings us to general manager report. Try to keep it under 6 hours if you would, please.
Yes, sir. The first thing I need to just confirm with the board and then inform the public, but due to some schedule conflicts, we need to change our initial strategic planning date from what was the 3rd and add it out onto the 16th of March. So basically what we had scheduled, the board had moved forward with was the 3rd and the 10th. Now we're looking at the 10th and the 16th. So this is maybe more information. I don't know, Dawn, if you think a motion is appropriate to note that. It was a very sudden calendar challenge. And thankfully, everybody's been able to readjust to add the 16th as our second date. So
I think we can just receive and file that, Bill. That's fine.
very good. Thank you. Just to touch on the COVID-19 situation, obviously we here at the office are back and we are open for public business. We are selling and installing RFID tags into our resident cars. So we're pleased to be able to do that and hopeful that the immunizations or vaccinations will get to us as well. I think our police are able to get it. Some of the rest of the employees are in the next tier. So we're looking forward to that. I had reported on our wastewater permit process. We've gotten an extension on that, which will help us finalize report and get it to the regional board. The tree grant, the fuel reduction, as Don noted, we have our agreement with Arrowhead Enterprises. They will have a process that we've worked to develop between them and the forester and us. And so that seems to all be in place. They have some identified areas for staging. So the initial area appears to be about 100 acres, probably $200,000, $225,000 worth of costs for removal. This is fairly consistent with the initial grant application and what our expectations were, which, as a reminder, were about 300 acres of treatment. And, you know, we have a maximum of $871,000 to spend to get this done. So I think we're on a good path. Hopefully they'll get out here yet this month. But first, the exemption forms have to come back from the state. Tim Morin, our forester, has sent them off for this first area of about 100 acres. And when those come back and the residents have given us their right of entry form to allow us to get onto their property, then Arrowhead can start removing some of that dead tree, firewood, fuel. So it is exciting. One of the items, and Don, I will defer to you because this one really involved you for some time, but the Cummings Valley Basin Water Master Plan that we were supportive of the district in pursuing. The courts ruled in their favor. So effectively what that does is changes the plan from somewhere on the 4,000 acre foot draw from that aquifer to about a 3,000 acre foot draw, which is more realistic, is the point that the water district has been making for some time, but finally got it, I'll say adjudicated, if that's the right term, Don. So that's good, because I know they've been at this for 5 years or more, and finally had success in getting it done. So I think that's good for all of us that rely on that Cummings Valley aquifer. We are continuing on our solid waste rate study. We're continuing on the regional urban water management plan. We'll be getting some data in for our share of that report. Our police department policy manual is online, so anyone who wishes to take a look at that, it's available for you. And perhaps even more importantly for our public, Mr. President, is the Kern County Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Mitigation Plan is now available for public review. And so try to be quick, but that is a plan that in the end will help us hopefully get some funding to mitigate potential hazards, whether it's snow or rain or fire or mud or earthquake, whatever those types of hazards we might suffer from in the future. We may be able to get some financing and funding, grant funding, to mitigate that before it happens, to try to reduce the effect of some potential hazards. So I encourage everybody to take a look. I think we've got a link on our site. And I'm going to say we revised or renewed our coffee with the GM, had better attendance and success then to catch up after a while. And then I'll end on a bad note, unfortunately, but we were notified that our Cal OES grant, which was for about $300,000 for generator installation, was denied. And it appears they had a very, very strong competition, lots of applications, and we were not selected. And with that, I will stand for any questions, Mr. President.
Thank you for that thorough report. Don't see any hands in the public. There's probably no comments from staff. That's been the trend. Director Grace.
I have no questions, Honorable President.
Thank you. And Director Jensen.
No questions, sir.
Vice President Roberts.
You know, I always do. So, Bill, with the fuel reduction program, getting ready to start, there's been discussion back and forth about having cost savings by not having to haul logs out of the area. We would save on transportation. And if we had a place to put logs for the residents' use as firewood, could be a savings and also a benefit to the residents. Has any further discussion gone on with that, and will we have that available?
Certainly, we're all aware of it. So just as background, Mr. President, Director Roberts, myself, Dawn, Tim Morin, and Vic Leader, who is the owner president of Arrowhead Enterprises, we've had numerous conversations about this. Everyone is aware of the desire to reuse the wood as much as possible. And whether that is in log form or wood chip form, we would like it to be reused here, both for the benefit of our association or our district if needed, or our residents in whatever shape or form. and that's good for all of them, and it keeps our costs down, which go to cutting out more wood. Again, the main point here is to get the dead wood out of there so it's not the fuel for a fire. And so we've done all that. I think I would say the plan, it will continue to come together, and so they're certainly aware of it, and we're always talking about it. The details aren't there yet, so when you ask, are we going to be able to do that, I can't answer it, but I would tell you and everyone else, we certainly will try to do it. I think Vic Leader certainly will do everything from Arrowhead's perspective and their ability to do it for us. They've been very cooperative and quite excited to get in here and show us what they can do. So we're not there yet to be able to answer your question specifically, but I'm very encouraged that they'll come up with a way to get this wood product into people's hands that would use it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Vice President Roberts. I have no questions for our GM. Item 13 is future agenda items. There's a change to item A, but Christy, will you review our future agenda items, please?
Yes, our strategic planning sessions will now be March 16th, March 10th and March 16th. Community volunteer recruitment and appointments will be coming up on March 11th. And the second reading and adoption of Ordinance 21-254 will also be coming up in March. I did not have anything else that was added during the meeting.
Thank you so much for that. Honorable board members, dedicated staff, and most importantly, the engaged public members that attended, I call this meeting adjourned just after wishing you all a happy Valentine's Day.
There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.